Michael B. Jordan sat in the sleek, cushioned chair of the studio, the leather cool against his back through the thin fabric of his tailored shirt. The air was crisp, laced with the faint scent of burnt coffee from the green room, mingling with the sharp tang of the host's perfume, something floral, heavy with jasmine. The cameras blinked red, their lenses glinting like predatory eyes, while the audience, hidden beyond the blinding stage lights, rustled with anticipation, their whispers a low hum that prickled his skin. His smile was practiced, a polished mask honed over years in the spotlight, but beneath it, his heart thumped hard, a rhythm that quickened with every passing second. The host, Emma Lane, leaned forward, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo, her lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice, bright and syrupy, filled the studio. "Michael, you know we love you here on The Late Show. You're the poster child for the American dream, rising from Newark to Hollywood royalty. But let's be real." She paused, tilting her head, her tone dipping into something teasing, almost conspiratorial. "You've probably heard a few jokes about, where you come from, right? Like, oh, Michael, did you hoop your way out of the hood?" The audience chuckled, a scattered ripple of laughter that hit Michael like a slap. His fingers tightened around the armrest, the smooth metal cold against his palm. A bead of sweat traced down his temple, though the studio was frigid. He forced a laugh, short and clipped, his jaw tight. Keep it together, he thought. They're watching. Always watching. The laughter felt like shards of glass in his ears, each chuckle a reminder of the invisible line he walked every day. He wanted to snap back, to call out the casual venom in her words, but the cameras were rolling, and the weight of expectation pressed against his chest like a vice. "Jokes like that," he said, his voice steady but low, "they hit different when you've lived the reality." He held her gaze, his dark eyes unwavering, searching for a flicker of recognition in hers. Emma blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she recovered, tossing her hair back with a laugh. "Oh, come on, Michael. It's just a bit of fun. You're a star now. Doesn't that make it all worth it?" Worth it? The words burned in his mind. Worth the years of sideways glances, the assumptions, the constant need to prove he belonged? His pulse raced, and he felt the heat rising in his chest, but he swallowed it down, his smile never wavering. The audience clapped, oblivious, as the show cut to commercial. Michael stepped off the set into the dim hallway, the buzz of the studio fading behind him. The air smelled of stale carpet and cleaning fluid, a sharp contrast to the polished glamour of the stage. His sneakers sank into the worn floor as he headed to the green room, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows that danced across the walls. His assistant, Jamal, was waiting, scrolling through his phone, his lanky frame slouched against a table cluttered with half-empty water bottles and snack wrappers. "You good, man?" Jamal asked, glancing up, his voice low but laced with concern. Michael nodded, though his jaw was still tight. "Yeah, just another day." He sank into a chair, the fabric creaking under his weight. The green room was a bubble of calm, but it couldn't shield him from the weight of the world outside. He was Michael B. Jordan, actor, producer, icon, but no amount of fame erased the reality of who he was in the eyes of others. A black man, always proving, always performing. His life was a balancing act. In Hollywood, he was a star, celebrated for his roles in Creed and Black Panther, but the industry was a maze of unspoken rules and subtle slights. At home in Los Angeles, he lived in a sleek, modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, the glass reflecting the golden hues of sunset. But even there, he felt the weight of being watched, not just by fans, but by neighbors who'd raise an eyebrow when he pulled into his driveway in his matte black Range Rover. "Who's this guy?" their looks seemed to say. "Does he belong here?" He thought of his family back in Newark, His mom, Donna, with her warm hugs and sharp wit, his dad, always quiet but proud. They'd raised him to hold his head high, to never let the world make him feel small. But some days, like today, that felt impossible. The joke from Emma Lane wasn't new. He'd heard versions of it his whole life, on sets, at parties, in interviews. Each one chipped away at him, a reminder that no matter how high he climbed, someone would always see him as less. In the green room, he sipped water from a plastic bottle, the cool liquid soothing his dry throat. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, a low drone that matched the buzz in his head. Jamal was still scrolling, but Michael could feel his friend's eyes on him, waiting for a sign. "She didn't mean it like that, right?" Jamal said, testing the waters. Michael exhaled, his breath sharp. "They never do." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the fluorescent light flickering faintly. He wondered how many others had sat in rooms like this, swallowing their anger, calculating their next move. He wasn't just Michael B. Jordan, the actor. He was a symbol, a beacon for kids who looked like him, who dreamed like he did. That weight was heavier than any role he'd ever played. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. A production assistant, a young woman with a clipboard and a nervous smile, poked her head in. "Mr. Jordan? They're ready for the next segment." Her voice was polite, but there was a distance in it, a formality that felt like a wall. He nodded, standing, his movements deliberate, like a man steeling himself for battle. Back on set, the lights were harsher, the air thicker with expectation. The audience was louder now, fueled by the commercial break and free drinks. Emma was back in her element, tossing out questions with practiced ease. "So, Michael," she said, her tone light but pointed, "you've worked with some huge directors, Ryan Coogler, Spielberg. But let's talk about the grind. You ever feel like you're still proving yourself? Like, you've got to work twice as hard to get half the respect?" The question landed like a punch. Michael's smile froze, his fingers twitching against the armrest. The audience didn't catch the subtext, but he did. Twice as hard. It wasn't just a question, it was a reminder. A reminder that no matter how many awards he won, how many box office records he broke, he'd always be seen as the guy who had to prove he belonged. He leaned forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Every day," he said. "But that's not new. It's just the game." The audience clapped, thinking it was a quip, but Emma's eyes narrowed slightly, like she hadn't expected him to push back, even subtly. The segment rolled on, but the microaggressions piled up. Emma interrupted him mid-sentence to pivot to a lighter topic. A producer in his earpiece whispered to "Keep it fun," cutting off his attempt to talk about representation in film. And then, as the show wrapped, Emma tossed out another joke, something about how Michael must be so good at basketball because of his athletic vibe. The audience laughed again, but this time, it felt like a wave crashing over him. His hands trembled slightly, the cold metal of the chair grounding him as he fought the urge to walk off the set. Why does it always come back to this? He thought. The stereotypes, the assumptions, the way they boxed him in without even realizing it. He could feel the anger bubbling, hot and sharp, but he swallowed it, his training kicking in. Don't give them the satisfaction. He smiled, nodded, played the part. But inside, he was screaming. Backstage, he paced the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The smell of cleaning fluid stung his nose, and the distant sound of the audience's applause felt like mockery. He thought about the kids watching at home, the ones who saw him as a hero. What would they think if they saw him now, biting his tongue, playing nice? The shame twisted in his gut, mingling with the anger. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for them. Michael stopped pacing, his breath slowing as he leaned against the wall. The cold concrete pressed against his shoulder, grounding him. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he was back in Newark, a kid with big dreams and a chip on his shoulder. His mom's voice echoed in his mind. "You don't owe them your silence, Michael. You owe yourself your truth." He opened his eyes, his gaze hardening. Enough was enough. He wasn't going to let another joke slide, another assumption go unchallenged. Not tonight. Not anymore. His pulse steadied, a quiet resolve settling over him like a cloak. He straightened, his shoulders squared, the tension in his muscles shifting from anger to purpose. "Jamal," he called, his voice low but firm. His assistant looked up, startled. "Get me the producer. I'm not done with this show yet." Jamal's eyebrows shot up, but he nodded, already pulling out his phone. Michael's mind raced, mapping out his next move. He wasn't sure what he'd say or how he'd say it, but he knew one thing. He was done playing by their rules. The cameras might be off for now, but the world was still watching. And he was ready to speak. The producer's office was a stark contrast to the glittering stage. A cramped room buried in the bowels of the studio building, lit by harsh overhead fluorescence that cast a sterile, blue-tinged glow on the cluttered desk. Papers were strewn about, mixed with empty coffee cups that emitted a stale, bitter aroma, clinging to the air like regret. Michael stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, while Jamal hovered behind him like a shadow. The producer, a middle-aged man named Greg Harlan, looked up from his computer, his glasses perched on the end of his nose, his face a mask of feigned surprise. "Michael? What's up? Great segment out there," Greg said, his voice oily, laced with that Hollywood charm that always felt performative. He gestured to a chair, but Michael remained standing, his feet planted firmly on the worn carpet that muffled his steps but not his resolve. Michael's heart still raced from the set, the echo of the audience's laughter ringing in his ears like a persistent tinnitus. The cool air from the vent above whispered against his skin, raising faint goosebumps on his arms. He could smell the faint trace of Greg's cologne, woody and overpowering, a scent that screamed entitlement. "We need to talk about Emma's comments," Michael said, his tone even, but his dark eyes locked onto Greg's with an intensity that made the producer shift uncomfortably. Greg leaned back, steepling his fingers, a classic move to buy time. "Comments? Come on, Mike, it's late-night TV. A little banter, that's all. The audience ate it up." His smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes, which darted to the door as if hoping for an escape. "Mike." The nickname grated, a subtle diminishment, stripping away the formality he afforded others. Michael's jaw tightened, the muscles flexing under his skin. He thought of all the times he'd let it slide, the urban references in scripts, the casting calls that typecast him, the executives who praised his authenticity like it was a novelty. But tonight, the joke about his background had cracked something inside him. It wasn't just about him. It was about every black actor who'd been reduced to a stereotype, every kid watching who internalized that poison. "I get banter," Michael replied, his voice low, controlled. "But when it's laced with racism, it's not funny. It's harmful." The words hung in the air, heavy, the silence broken only by the hum of the computer fan. Greg's face paled slightly, his fingers drumming on the desk, a rhythmic tap that betrayed his unease. "Racism? Whoa, that's a strong word. Emma didn't mean it like that. She's one of the good ones." Greg's defense was reflexive, his body language closing off as he crossed his arms. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in, the fluorescent light flickering faintly, casting erratic shadows that danced like doubts in Michael's mind. Outside, in the hallway, the muffled sounds of the crew wrapping up filtered through. Laughter, clattering equipment, the occasional shout. Michael wondered how many of them had laughed along, complicit in their silence. He felt a surge of isolation, the weight of being the one to call it out, but beneath it, a spark of clarity. "Intent doesn't erase impact," he said, stepping closer, his presence commanding. "You need to address this. On air, or I'll do it myself." Greg's eyes widened, the threat registering. "Look, Michael, you're a star. We love having you. But rocking the boat? That could hurt ratings, yours included." The subtext was clear: play nice, or pay the price. Michael's hands clenched at his sides, the cool air now feeling icy against his heated skin. He could taste the bitterness in his throat, a mix of anger and resolve. As he left the office, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed down the hall, Michael felt the conflict deepening. This wasn't just a bad night. It was systemic, woven into the fabric of the industry. Jamal fell into step beside him, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "What now?" he asked, his voice hushed. Michael didn't answer immediately. The building's lobby loomed ahead, glass doors reflecting the city lights outside, twinkling stars against the dark night sky. The air outside hit him like a wave, carrying the scent of exhaust and street food from nearby vendors. Cars honked in the distance, a chaotic symphony that matched his thoughts. "Now," he said finally, "we make some noise." The next morning, Michael's phone buzzed incessantly on his nightstand, the vibrations pulling him from a fitful sleep. Sunlight streamed through the blinds of his LA home, casting striped shadows across the hardwood floor. The room smelled of fresh linen and the faint citrus from his diffuser, a small attempt at calm in a storm. He grabbed the phone, squinting at the screen, texts from his agent, emails from publicists, and a flurry of notifications from social media. The clip from the show had gone viral overnight. Not the whole segment, but the joke, dissected and debated across platforms. Some defended Emma as, "Just kidding." Others called it out for what it was. Michael's subtle pushback was praised in some corners, ignored in others. He sat up, the cool sheets pooling around him, his bare feet hitting the floor with a soft thud. Time to step up, he thought, his mind racing through strategies. He started small but deliberate. First, a call to his agent, Sarah, whose voice crackled over the line with urgency. "Michael, this could blow up. What do you want to do?" "Release a statement," he said, pacing the room, the sunlight warming his skin. "Not defensive. Honest. About the microaggressions we face daily." Sarah hesitated, the pause heavy with implication. "Are you sure? It might alienate some folks." "That's the point," he replied, his voice firm. "If they're alienated by truth, they're not worth keeping." He hung up, feeling a mix of fear and exhilaration, the adrenaline pumping like before a big scene. By afternoon, the statement was out, a measured post on his social media, detailing not just the incident, but the broader issue of casual racism in media. "We deserve better than jokes that diminish us," he wrote. The responses flooded in. Support from fans, retweets from fellow actors, but also backlash. Trolls accused him of being too sensitive. Memes twisted his words. The air in his home office felt thicker, the scent of his coffee turning acrid as it cooled untouched. Then came the call from a colleague, Tessa, a black actress he'd worked with on a previous film. Her voice was warm, supportive. "I saw your post. Proud of you, Mike. But watch your back. The industry doesn't like being called out." They talked for an hour, sharing stories, the overlooked auditions, the edited scripts that softened their edges. Michael's grip on the phone tightened, the plastic warm against his palm. "I'm done whispering," he said. "Time to speak loud." His first public action was an interview with a progressive podcast that evening. The studio was intimate, dimly lit with soft lamps that cast a golden hue, the air scented with incense, sandalwood grounding. The host, a young woman named Lena, leaned in, her eyes earnest. Michael, walk us through last night. He did, his words flowing with a passion he hadn't unleashed before. It's not just one joke. It's a pattern. And ignoring it perpetuates it. The microphone amplified his voice, each word a step forward. Lena nodded, probing deeper. How do you respond without losing your cool? You don't always, he admitted, his internal monologue swirling. Show them your strength, not just your pain. The conversation shifted the narrative, garnering more support online. But the pushback intensified. An email from the show's network hinted at misunderstandings, urging him to retract. Michael's resolve hardened, the quiet hum of his computer the only sound as he typed a polite but firm refusal. The climax came 2 days later at an industry panel on diversity in Hollywood. The venue was a grand auditorium in downtown LA, filled with executives, actors, and journalists. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and expensive perfumes, the stage lights hot and unrelenting, casting deep shadows that accentuated the divides in the room. Michael sat on the panel, flanked by white executives who smiled for the cameras but fidgeted in their seats. The moderator, a neutral figure in a crisp suit, steered the conversation to challenges in representation. One executive, a silver-haired man named Paul, chimed in. We've made strides. Look at films like yours, Michael. Real progress. Michael felt the tension coil in his chest, his heart pounding like a drum. The audience murmured, flashes from cameras popping like distant fireworks. He could feel the sweat beading on his forehead, the cool draft from the AC doing little to ease the heat. This is it, he thought. The moment to confront or concede. But progress isn't enough if it's token, Michael interjected, his voice cutting through the polite chatter. The room hushed, the silence heavy, broken only by the rustle of programs and shifting seats. Paul's face tightened, his smile strained. Token? We're investing millions in diverse stories. Stories told through a lens that still centers whiteness. Michael countered, his words sharp but measured. The internal battle raged, fear of backlash clashing with the fire of dignity. He thought of his family, of the kids inspired by him, the weight pressing like the spotlights above. The exchange escalated, Paul defending the status quo with veiled barbs. Not everyone sees racism everywhere. The audience split. Some applauded Michael, others whispered dissent. Emma Lane was in the crowd, her presence a ghost from the show, her eyes avoiding his. Michael's hands trembled slightly under the table, the wood smooth and cool. He pushed on. It's not about seeing it everywhere. It's about acknowledging it when it's right in front of us. The psychological pressure peaked, doubts whispering, will this end your career? But his dignity won, a quiet force that silenced the noise. As the panel ended, the room erupted in a mix of applause and tension. Michael stood, his posture unyielding, the shadows lengthening as lights dimmed. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The auditorium's heavy silence lingered as Michael stepped off the stage, the echo of his words still vibrating in the air. The scent of polished wood and lingering cologne clung to the room, now dimming as the house lights softened, casting long, wavering shadows across the crowd. His heart pounded, a steady drumbeat against his ribs, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was clarity. The weight of the panel discussion, the confrontation with Paul, the eyes of the audience, some supportive, others hostile, had solidified his resolve. He wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for those who'd never get a seat at the table. Backstage, the air was cooler, laced with the faint metallic tang of stage equipment and the musty smell of old curtains. Jamal met him in the hallway, his eyes wide with a mix of pride and worry. Man, you didn't hold back out there, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. Michael's lips curved into a small, tired smile, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. The fabric of his blazer felt heavy, like armor he was ready to shed. "I'm done playing small," Michael said, his voice steady, though his hand still carried a faint tremor. He could feel the pulse at his fingertips, the warmth of his own conviction spreading through him. He'd made a choice on that panel, not just to call out the industry's hypocrisy but to act on it. As he walked toward the exit, the distant hum of the city filtered through the glass doors, the honking cars and chatter of passers-by a reminder of the world beyond these walls. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Tessa. "You shook the room. Keep going." He exhaled, the cool night air hitting his face as he stepped outside, the city lights twinkling like stars against the dark sky. The smell of street food, grilled meat and spices, wafted from a nearby truck, grounding him in the moment. He knew what he had to do next, not just talk, but build. He'd been planning a production company for years, one that would tell stories unfiltered, stories that didn't need to justify their existence to gatekeepers like Paul. Tonight, he decided, was the night to make it real. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick email to his team, outlining the vision. A studio that centered marginalized voices, starting with a project about systemic racism in Hollywood, inspired by his own experiences. His fingers moved with purpose, the screen's glow illuminating his face as the city buzzed around him. This wasn't just a statement, it was a declaration of war on silence. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Michael's panel comments spread like wildfire online, clips shared and dissected across platforms. Support poured in, messages from young actors, fans, even a few industry veterans who'd stayed quiet too long. But the backlash was fierce. Industry blogs labeled him divisive, and whispers of difficult to work with began circulating. A major studio pulled out of a project he'd been eyeing, the email vague but pointed. "Timing's not right." The sting was sharp, the air in his home office heavy, with the scent of cooling coffee and the faint hum of his laptop as he read the news. Yet, there were victories too. Tessa connected him with a group of independent filmmakers eager to collaborate on his production company. Meetings piled up, each one electric with possibility. In one, held in a small downtown loft, the air thick with the smell of fresh paint and ambition, a young writer pitched a script that mirrored Michael's own journey, a story of dignity carved out of adversity. Michael leaned forward, the wooden chair creaking under him, his eyes alight. "This," he said, tapping the script, "this is what we're building." The network reached out, too, offering a tepid apology for Emma's comments, but Michael saw it for what it was, damage control. He declined their invitation to return, his response polite but firm. The city outside his window glittered, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the cold sterility of the studio he'd left behind. He felt the weight of consequence, some doors closing, others opening, but for the first time, he felt free. A week later, Michael sat in a community center in Newark, the place where he'd first dreamed of the spotlight. The room smelled of polished floors and the faint sweetness of donuts from a nearby table, where kids laughed and chased each other before the event. He was there to speak to a group of teens, part of a mentorship program he'd quietly supported for years. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a soft glow on the eager faces before him, their eyes wide with dreams that mirrored his own at their age. He told them his story, not the polished version, but the raw one. The jokes, the slights, the moments he'd swallowed his pride. The kids listened, some nodding, others fidgeting, but all hanging on his words. When he finished, a girl in the front row, no older than 15, raised her hand. Her voice was soft but steady. "How do you keep going when they make you feel like you don't belong?" Michael paused, the question cutting deeper than he expected. The room was quiet, the hum of the lights and the distant laughter fading into the background. He thought of Emma's smirk, Paul's defensiveness, the countless times he'd been asked to prove his worth. Then he thought of his mom's words, his own resolve, the kids staring back at him now. "You don't let their doubts define you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You build your own table, set your own rules, and you never, ever let them take your dignity." As he spoke, he noticed a figure at the back of the room, half hidden in the shadows. It was Emma Lane, her blonde hair tucked under a cap, her face unreadable. She'd come unannounced, no cameras, no entourage. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air crackled with unspoken tension. She nodded slightly, a gesture that could have been acknowledgement or apology, then slipped out before he could respond. The twist wasn't her presence, it was what it meant. She'd heard him, seen him, perhaps for the first time. Not as a star, not as a symbol, but as a man who'd refused to be diminished. Michael turned back to the kids, his voice stronger now, the room bathed in the warm glow of possibility. He didn't know if Emma's nod was sincere, and he didn't care. The victory wasn't in changing her, it was in changing the narrative for the kids in front of him, for the stories he'd tell, for the legacy he'd build. As he left the center, the night air cool against his skin, the city's pulse alive with honks and laughter, Michael felt a quiet triumph. The stars above Newark shone brighter than Hollywood's lights, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged.